Zuko. In Avatar, a world where elemental nations are at war and one boy must master all four elements to bring peace, Zuko begins as the exiled prince of the Fire Nation. Banished by his father, Fire Lord Ozai, for speaking out of turn, Zuko becomes obsessed with capturing the Avatar to reclaim his honor. At 16, he's assigned a mission most consider impossible. He's fueled by desperation and anger, chasing Aang across the globe. His uncle Iroh becomes his guide, gently steering him towards self-reflection. Zuko struggles with his identity, especially after living anonymously in Ba Sing Se, working in a tea shop and seeing the consequences of war. After siding with Azula during the invasion, he finds no satisfaction in regaining favor. Instead, he questions everything and chooses to leave the Fire Nation behind. He joins Team Avatar, helps Aang learn firebending, and fights against his own people to restore balance. His redemption arc is powerful because it's not sudden. It's layered with mistakes, reversals, and internal conflict. Zuko's shift from antagonist to ally highlights personal accountability and the painful process of growth. His journey isn't perfect, but that's what makes it resonate so deeply. Loki. In the series Loki, he's pulled from the timeline right after the Battle of New York and dropped into the custody of the Time Variance Authority. Stripped of his power and identity, Loki's forced to confront the impact of his actions across realities. The TVA reveals he's a variant, not even meant to exist in this form. At first, he tries to manipulate his way out, sticking to his old tricks, but after seeing the destruction his choices cause, especially in the case of other Loki variants, he starts questioning his purpose. Meeting Sylvie, another variant like him, shakes everything. She's driven by revenge, he's lost in self-doubt, but their partnership pushes Loki to reflect on more than survival. He risks everything to stop the TVA's lies, and when they reach He Who Remains, Loki doesn't choose power, he chooses caution. Sylvie kills the man behind the curtain, but Loki's left devastated. By the end, he's fighting to save the multiverse, not rule it. His arc matters because he learns that real strength isn't control, it's sacrifice. Loki shifts from a narcissist to someone who understands connection, loss, and the weight of choice. It's a redemption not built on glory, but growth. For more videos like this, smash that like and subscribe button for more content. Anyways, A-Train. In The Boys, he starts as the fastest man alive and a member of the Seven, obsessed with fame, status, and endorsement deals. His addiction to Compound V boosts his speed but also pushes him over the edge. He kills Robin, Huey's girlfriend, without even stopping. He hides the truth, protects Vought's secrets, and later murders his own girlfriend Popclaw when she leaks too much. But the cracks start forming when he suffers a heart attack during a race. With his speed failing and Vought sidelining him, he's forced to confront his own expendability. He watches other supes like Homelander and Stormfront dominate the narrative while he's shoved into the background. His return to the Seven isn't a triumph, it's a reminder he's replaceable. When he learns about Stormfront's racism, A-Train starts pushing back. He leaks her files to the team, helping expose her past. It's not a full transformation, but it's real. He stops pretending everything's fine and chooses to act even if it costs him his career. A-Train's redemption arc matters because it's about someone used by the system finally seeing the cost. He may not become a hero, but he stops being a coward, and that's real progress. Jaime Lannister. In Game of Thrones, he's introduced as the smug Kingslayer who pushed a child from a tower and carried on an incestuous relationship with his sister. Known for breaking his oath by killing the Mad King, Jaime's hated across the realm. But the truth is more complicated. He saved the city from wildfire. That hidden act of heroism sets the stage for his arc. Captured and maimed by Stark forces, he loses his sword hand, the very symbol of his identity. With Brienne of Tarth, he starts showing who he really is. He protects her, defends her honor, and even confesses why he killed the king. His shift isn't clean or fast. He's still tied to Cersei, still cruel at times, but moments of growth start stacking up. He returns to fight the dead at Winterfell, knights Brienne, and stands for something beyond family. Yet, even with all that, he spirals back to Cersei in the end. His redemption isn't about becoming perfect, it's about the fight to be better. Jaime's arc matters because it's filled with contradiction. He evolves, regresses, and dies in failure, but that journey from blind arrogance to fractured self-awareness makes him unforgettable. Ben Linus. In Lost, he's introduced as a master manipulator, posing as a survivor named Henry Gale, before revealing himself as the leader of the others. Cold, calculating, and obsessed with the island's will, Ben orchestrates kidnappings, betrayals, and executions without blinking. He lies constantly, keeps secrets from allies, and justifies murder as protecting something greater. He watches his own daughter die and still clings to power, but slowly, Ben loses control. The island rejects him, Lockout maneuvers him, and his faith in Jacob shatters. Stripped of influence, he's forced to live among those he tormented. In the final season, his choices shift. He admits his failures, tries to protect people instead of manipulate them, and shows remorse without demanding forgiveness. He even kills Widmore, not for power, but in grief and rage over Alex's death. By the series' end, he stays behind to help rebuild, not needing a reward. His redemption arc matters because it's built on reflection, not absolution. For a character defined by control, choosing humility becomes his real turning point. T-Bag. In Prison Break, he's introduced as one of the most vile and unpredictable inmates in Fox River. Theodore Bagwell is violent, manipulative, and unapologetically dangerous, often using fear and charm to get what he wants. His crimes are horrific, and his survival instincts override any sense of morality. But as the series progresses, cracks start to show. T-Bag clings to the idea of family, especially when he discovers he might have a son. He tries to leave crime behind, searching for normalcy and even landing a job under an assumed identity. Of course, it falls apart. He's still a wanted criminal with too much blood on his hands. He's constantly dragged back into chaos, and his efforts to change are always tainted by selfish motives. But there are rare moments where he shows restraint, even mercy, hinting at a man tormented by what he's become. He's not redeemed, not truly, but he tries in his own twisted way. T-Bag's arc matters because it explores the limits of redemption. Not every character gets to be forgiven. Some carry the weight forever. And with T-Bag, it's that unshakable tension between monstrosity and humanity that makes his story so haunting. Darth Maul. In Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and Rebels, he begins as a weapon, trained by Darth Sidious to kill without question. After being cut down by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Naboo and presumed dead, he survives through rage alone. Found broken in body and mind, Maul rebuilds himself with cybernetic legs and an obsession with revenge. He rises again, takes control of the Shadow Collective, and challenges both Jedi and Sith. His hatred for Kenobi and Sidious drives him to carve out power wherever he can, including seizing Mandalore. But even as a warlord, Maul's haunted. He seeks meaning beyond anger, but finds only betrayal and defeat. Ahsoka Tano resists his plans, Dooku dismisses him, and Sidious kills his brother Savage. Every step, Maul's reminded he's a pawn discarded by the very order he served. In Rebels, he's older, still scheming, but less certain. He tries to mold Ezra Bridger into an apprentice, hoping to leave a legacy. When he finally finds Kenobi again, it ends not with spectacle, but silence. Maul's redemption doesn't come from changing sides. It comes from understanding he was never truly free. His arc matters because it shows a villain whose tragedy isn't his evil, but his wasted life. Morgan Jones. In The Walking Dead, he first appears as a grieving father trying to protect his son after the world collapses. But when tragedy strikes and his boy dies, Morgan vanishes into madness. When he reemerges, he's violent and unstable, killing indiscriminately and writing cryptic warnings. His turning point comes after meeting Eastman, a man who teaches him Aikido and the value of all life. Morgan adopts a strict code of nonviolence, building prison cells instead of using weapons. But the apocalypse doesn't reward pacifism. His beliefs clash with Rick's hardened group, and Morgan begins unraveling again. He kills to protect Carol, but then isolates himself, haunted by the loss of his values. Over time, Morgan finds a middle ground, not rejecting violence entirely, but using it with purpose. In Fear the Walking Dead, his philosophy matures. He leads, heals, and fights when needed, often putting others before himself. He's not immune to despair, but he learns to keep going, shaped by every loss. Morgan's arc matters because it captures the extreme toll of survival. He doesn't just swing between sanity and chaos, he learns from it, finding a way to live that's both strong and humane in a world gone savage. Kreese. In Cobra Kai, he returns as the unrelenting sensei who built Cobra Kai on fear, aggression, and dominance. He preaches strength through pain and shows no mercy to weakness. But flashbacks reveal his foundation isn't just cruelty, it's trauma. As a young man, Kreese served in Vietnam, where he faced brutal choices that shaped his worldview. Betrayed by comrades, forced to fight for survival, and carrying the guilt of loss, he came back hardened. Cobra Kai became his way to impose order on a chaotic world. When he reclaims the the dojo from Johnny, he manipulates students and pushes them to extremes, justifying every action as necessary. But cracks appear. He's loyal to the few people he sees as equals, and he shows fleeting remorse when he sees the same violence repeat in his students. His relationship with Tori hints at a warped sense of protection. He's not out for money or fame. He's fighting ghosts. Kreese's arc matters because it's not about turning into a hero. It's about understanding a villain. His past doesn't excuse his actions, but it explains them. Underneath all the rage is a man still stuck in the jungle, fighting battles that ended decades ago. Amanda Waller. In Peacemaker, she's the cold, calculating force behind Project Butterfly, orchestrating deadly missions with zero concern for moral lines. She sends criminals to die, manipulates events from the shadows, and treats everyone as expendable tools. But when she brings in her daughter, Leota Adebayo, to embed with the team, her grip begins to slip. Adebayo forms bonds, sees the human cost, and starts pushing back. Waller watches her own daughter question everything she stands for, and it rattles her. For the first time, her decisions face real scrutiny from someone she can't dismiss. When Adebayo leaks information about Project Butterfly and exposes Task Force X's existence to the public, Waller's secrets unravel. She's not arrested, not taken down, but her power takes a hit. The loyalty she counted on isn't there anymore, and her strategy of control through fear starts to falter. Waller's arc matters because it shifts her from untouchable puppet master to someone facing consequences, even within her own circle. She doesn't change overnight, and she doesn't apologize, but the walls she built start to crack. Through Peacemaker, her character stops being just a symbol of control and starts becoming a woman navigating the fallout of her own legacy. Katrina Bennett. In Suits, she's introduced as Louis Litt's fiercely ambitious associate, sharp-tongued, elitist, and completely uninterested in being liked. She uses her intellect like a weapon, often pushing others aside to get ahead. Her arrival creates instant tension, especially with Donna and the associates, and she quickly gains a reputation for arrogance. But after multiple setbacks, including being fired, sidelined, and overlooked, Katrina starts to shift. She begins working harder to earn trust, not demand it. Her loyalty to Louis deepens, and she takes real risks to support him, even when it costs her personally. When she returns to the firm in a different role, she no longer operates like she's above everyone. She mentors associates, apologizes when she's wrong, and proves she's more than a legal machine. One of her biggest turning points comes when she's offered name partner and realizes the personal sacrifices that come with it. She chooses integrity over ambition, something her early self would never have understood. Katrina's arc matters because it's about growing from isolation to connection. She learns that brilliance means nothing without empathy, and by the end, she's not just respected, she's relied on, trusted, and genuinely part of the firm's heart. Helena. In Orphan Black, she's introduced as a violent, unpredictable assassin raised by a cult to believe she's the original clone. Conditioned to kill her sisters, Helena is feral, speaks in cryptic phrases, and moves with brutal precision. She stabs Beth, targets Sarah, and leaves chaos behind her. But beneath the savagery is a child molded by isolation and lies. Once captured and held by the Clone Club, she begins to bond with her sisters, especially Sarah. That connection becomes everything. Helena's loyalty shifts from her cult handlers to her newfound family. She risks her life to protect them, endures more captivity, and even carries Sarah's children in solidarity. As she slowly heals, her instincts remain deadly, but her heart becomes her guide. She finds humor, connection, and even love in small, strange moments. Her arc doesn't erase her past. It builds from it. Helena remains haunted, but no longer controlled. Her redemption matters because it's not about becoming soft. It's about using her strength to defend, not destroy. From hunter to protector, she transforms into someone capable of mercy, love, and sacrifice. By the end, she's not just a survivor, she's a sister in every way that counts. Sid Jenkins. In Skins, he starts as the awkward, passive sidekick to Tony, constantly following others and lacking any real confidence. He fails school, lies to his parents, and lets people walk all over him. His obsession with Michelle blinds him to Cassie's affection, and he makes selfish choices without thinking about the fallout. But Sid's life takes a hard turn when his father dies. That loss hits him harder than he expects, forcing him to step out of his haze and face reality. He begins to take responsibility, not just for himself, but for others. He stops chasing Michelle and starts seeing Cassie for who she is. He defends his friends, stops letting Tony dominate him, and finally starts thinking for himself. By the end of the second season, Sid has evolved into someone more grounded. He travels to New York to find Cassie, a move that shows courage and purpose, something his early self would have never dared. His arc matters because it reflects slow, believable growth. Sid doesn't become a hero overnight, but he does become a person capable of love, loyalty, and action. It's the shift from passive to present that marks his quiet but real redemption. Tom Neville. In Revolution, he begins as a ruthless enforcer for the Monroe Republic, carrying out violent orders without hesitation. He uses fear to control towns, executes dissenters, and justifies his cruelty as necessary for order. A former insurance adjuster, Neville embraced power when society collapsed, becoming a symbol of the regime's brutality. But as the series unfolds, cracks begin to form. His relationship with his son Jason forces him to confront the man he's become. Jason sees through the justifications and challenges Neville's authority, forcing him to reevaluate his choices. After Monroe turns on him, Neville loses his position and must survive without an army backing him. That fall strips away his delusions of righteousness. He begins making decisions based on conscience, not commands. He eventually allies with Miles and the Resistance, not out of convenience, but because he starts believing in something bigger than himself. His arc matters because it shows how power corrupts, and how losing it can lead to clarity. Neville doesn't shed all his flaws, but he stops being a weapon and starts acting like a man. His redemption isn't perfect, but it's believable, forged through loss, pain, and finally, choice. Harold Finch. In Person of Interest, he's the brilliant but reclusive programmer who built the machine, an artificial intelligence designed to detect threats and prevent terrorist attacks. After the government repurposes it to ignore everyday crimes, Finch secretly begins using it to save civilians marked as irrelevant. He's haunted by guilt, knowing his creation is powerful enough to reshape the world, and possibly destroy it. Living under fake names, walking with a limp, and trusting almost no one, Finch operates in the shadows. But over time, he builds a team, forming bonds with people like Reese, Shaw, and Root. Each person draws him out of his shell, forcing him to confront the moral, gray areas his work creates. Finch's arc intensifies when Samaritan, a rival AI, goes online and starts controlling the world with terrifying precision. He's forced to make harder and more dangerous choices, including sacrificing parts of the machine to protect lives. Despite being nonviolent by nature, he risks everything to stop the misuse of his technology. Finch's redemption arc matters because it's about responsibility. He never wanted power, but once he had it, he spent every day trying to use it for good. Quietly, persistently, he becomes a guardian in the shadows. Eric F. Young. In Sex Education, he's first seen as the bold, flamboyant best friend of Otis, full of color, jokes, and over-the-top energy. But behind the sparkle, Eric struggles with acceptance. From others, from his deeply religious family, and even from himself. Early on, he hides behind humor, masking his insecurity and pain when he's bullied or rejected. He tries to fit into different worlds, sometimes shrinking himself just to feel safe. But after a violent attack and a trip to Nigeria, Eric begins reevaluating who he is and what he needs. He stops trying to be what people expect and starts living more honestly. His relationships become deeper, more balanced. He supports Otis, calls out unfairness, and builds a real partnership with Adam, helping him open up. But when that relationship stalls, Eric chooses to walk away, not out of anger, but growth. He realizes love isn't enough without self-respect. Eric's arc matters because it's not just about coming out, it's about stepping into confidence. He goes from the sidekick to someone with his own voice, purpose, and boundaries. He becomes the kind of friend who lifts others without losing himself, and that evolution is what makes him so powerful. Paul Spector. In the fall, he's introduced as a meticulous, cold-blooded serial killer leading a double life as a family man and grief counselor. His murders are ritualistic, calculated, and deeply disturbing, targeting women with obsessive control. He manipulates those around him, taunts the police, and displays almost no remorse. But as Detective Stella Gibson closes in, Paul's composed mask begins to slip. When captured, he fakes amnesia, stalls investigations, and toys with everyone involved. Yet behind the games, there are flashes of something else. He begins to reflect on his past, including childhood abuse and emotional damage that shaped his violence. In prison, stripped of control, Paul faces his actions more directly. He even participates in therapy, though it's unclear how much is real. His final act, a brutal and self-destructive confession followed by suicide, is not framed as justice, it's surrender. Paul's arc matters because it doesn't seek forgiveness. It shows how even the most monstrous figures can be haunted by what they've done. There's no salvation, but there is recognition. His end is chilling, but in that collapse there's a grim kind of honesty, a glimpse into how deeply broken a person can be and still grasp what they've become. Chibs Telford. In Sons of Anarchy, he starts as a loyal, battle-scarred enforcer for Sam Crow, known for his sharp mind, thick accent, and violent efficiency. He's fiercely committed to the club and holds deep grudges, especially against Jimmy Ussaw for past betrayals in Belfast. But as chaos escalates around the club, Chibs becomes a grounding force. While others act out of impulse or ego, he thinks through consequences, often stepping in to de-escalate tension. His loyalty never wavers, but he begins prioritizing the long-term survival of the club over short-term vengeance. He mentors Juice despite betrayals, showing rare compassion, and keeps Jax anchored as others lose control. After Jax's death, Chibs is chosen as the next president, not because he's the most violent, but because he's the most stable. He doesn't revel in the title, but carries it with responsibility, aiming to steer the club away from the destructive legacy that consumed so many. Chibs' arc matters because it reflects a shift from muscle to mind. He proves that strength in Sam Crow doesn't have to mean chaos. His rise is quiet but powerful, shaped by patience, pain, and a vision for something better than just bloodshed. Catherine Martell. In Twin Peaks, she's introduced as a sharp and manipulative figure running the Packard sawmill with a mix of cunning and cruelty. She schemes against her sister-in-law Josie, conspires to burn down the mill, and fakes her own death to maneuver behind the scenes. Always calculated, Catherine hides her emotions behind layers of control, using others as pawns in her game for power and survival. But as the town unravels and personal betrayals mount, she slowly begins to change. Her interactions with Pete soften, revealing glimpses of genuine affection beneath the barbed exchanges. She stops playing every angle and begins choosing quieter paths. While she never becomes openly vulnerable, her schemes fade, and she steps away from the ruthless games that defined her. Her final appearances show a woman more contemplative than commanding, still guarded, but no longer driven by conquest. Catherine's arc matters because it doesn't end with redemption through confession. It ends with a slowing down, a subtle unraveling of bitterness. She never asks for sympathy, but the silence around her by the end suggests a woman who's finally listening to the echoes of her own choices, trading ambition for something quieter and maybe a little peace. Rumpelstiltskin. In Once Upon a Time, he begins as a cowardly spinner who gains immense dark magic to escape weakness. As the Dark One, he becomes manipulative, cruel, and obsessed with power, controlling others and justifying every betrayal as protection. He abandons his son Balefire, lies to Belle, and constantly chooses magic over love. Even when he claims to change, he keeps secrets, breaking hearts to hold on to his control. But through his relationship with Belle and the haunting loss of his son, cracks start to form. Belle challenges him, believing there's good left, and though he continues to fail her, her faith lingers in his mind. His path to redemption is jagged. He relapses into darkness, manipulates Emma, and betrays alliances. But when faced with ultimate loss, Rumpelstiltskin makes a final choice that defines him. He sacrifices himself to destroy the final villain, giving up the power he clung to for centuries. His arc matters because it shows that even the most corrupted soul can choose differently at the end. Rumpelstiltskin doesn't erase his past, he pays for it, and in that final moment, love wins over power, leaving behind a legacy marked by both ruin and redemption. Toph's father. In Legend of Korra, he reappears long after his controlling role in Avatar, The Last Airbender, where he had tried to shelter Toph, denying her independence and underestimating her strength because of her blindness. Back then, he confined her, dictated her life, and refused to see her as capable. His restrictions pushed Toph to run away and prove herself. Years later, he doesn't try to reclaim authority or rewrite history. He watches from a distance as Toph becomes one of the world's greatest earthbenders and the first metalbender. He no longer denies her abilities or questions her choices. While their reunion in Korra is brief and understated, his demeanor changes. He's no longer imposing and no longer dismissive. There's no grand apology, but his actions suggest quiet recognition of who she became. He listens, observes, and accepts her without protest. That shift matters because it's not a loud redemption, it's a subtle, human one. He evolves from a man desperate to control his daughter to someone who lets her stand as she is. In a world full of dramatic change, his small arc is a reminder that sometimes redemption is just learning to let go. Daniel Salazar. In Fear the Walking Dead, he starts as a quiet barber with a dark past, hiding his history as a government torturer. When society collapses, those skills resurface, and Daniel becomes a ruthless protector, willing to do terrible things for those he loves. He's haunted by guilt, especially after the loss of his wife and the choices he makes to survive. As the series progresses, Daniel endures more trauma. He's shot, presumed dead, and suffers isolation. When he resurfaces, he's not the same. He struggles with memory loss and paranoia, unsure if he can trust even himself. But instead of giving in, Daniel tries to do better. He uses his experience to help, offering stability to those around him, even while questioning his own mind. He no longer kills without thought. He strategizes, listens, and protects with intention. His relationships with characters like Strand and Charlie show his deep sense of loyalty, even when he's been betrayed. Daniel's arc matters because it's built on survival, reflection, and resilience. He doesn't escape his past, but he refuses to be defined by it. Through pain and instability, he chooses to become someone others can count on, and that choice defines his redemption. Billy Hargrove. In Stranger Things, he enters as an aggressive, volatile presence, tormenting Max, threatening Lucas, and radiating unchecked rage. His behavior is toxic, shaped by an abusive father and a life spent channeling pain into dominance. But when the Mind Flayer takes over his body, Billy's cruelty becomes something even more terrifying. He becomes its puppet, hunting victims and terrorizing Hawkins, losing more of himself with every attack. Yet inside, fragments of Billy remain. In Season 3's climax, Eleven reaches into his memories and uncovers a past filled with heartbreak. His mother's love, the beach, moments of innocence he buried long ago. That emotional jolt breaks through the monster's control. In an instant, Billy turns against the Mind Flayer, placing himself between it and Eleven. He's impaled, but not before regaining agency. His final act isn't redemption through survival, it's redemption through sacrifice. Billy doesn't explain himself, doesn't ask for forgiveness, he just chooses to protect instead of destroy. His arc matters because it shows that even someone consumed by anger and darkness can find clarity, if only for a moment. Billy dies a villain to many, but he leaves as something more. Proof that even the broken can choose to be brave. Gaius Baltar. In Battlestar Galactica, he begins as a self-absorbed genius whose vanity leads him to betray the human race. Manipulated by a Cylon posing as his lover, he gives access to defense systems directly enabling the near annihilation of humanity. Throughout the early seasons, he lies, evades responsibility, and survives by aligning with whoever holds power. He becomes president, makes disastrous decisions, and collaborates with the Cylons during their occupation of New Caprica. But as the war drags on, Baltar begins to change. He's stripped of influence, imprisoned and mocked, but finds a bizarre path through faith. Embracing a mysterious role as a spiritual guide, he starts preaching about a single God, not for personal gain, but because he genuinely begins to believe. He aids those in need, comforts the lost, and even fights when necessary. By the time humanity reaches Earth, Baltar isn't the same coward who clung to privilege. He chooses a humble life, returning to farming and helping build a future. His arc matters because it reflects messy, layered redemption. He doesn't erase his guilt, but he stops running from it. In the end, Gaius Baltar does something rare for his kind. He changes, and it sticks. For more videos like this, smash that like and subscribe button for more content.